do a little knife skills challenge.
Okay.
Where you will be required to mince the garlic.
Okay.
Then you're going to Macédoine, the sweet potato.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Mademoiselle, the sweet potato.
Macédoine.
Do I have to say that?
Macédoine.
And then Julienne, the jicama. This will be a time test.
So it's, oh, okay, so it is a speed thing.
Oh, damn. All right. I'm just going to take my own sweet time.
Honestly, aside from school, like culinary school, like you don't do this. Nobody wants square vegetables, you know?
I haven't done it in ages.
I don't think I've ever done these two things before. I've done this to ginger.
I feel pretty good about my knife skills.
I think my knife skills are pretty good. I'm not ashamed of my knife skills.
I'm by no means the best with a knife, but I'm comfortable with it.
You know, I don't feel like totally out of my league, but definitely like I spend a lot less time cooking than these guys do.
Who do you think is the fastest in the kitchen?
I don't know. We will find out.
And go. Smash.
I bet no one peeled the garlic, huh?
There are a few ways to mince a clove of garlic, and oftentimes I think you'll see people just slice all the way through it and julienne those and then come crosswise on them. But I find that the most precise way to do it is to actually cut the way that you would half of an onion, just laying it on its flat side or cutting a flat side if you need to, making slits horizontally, perpendicular to those, and then cutting across it, leaving the butt end. Makes a perfect dice.
I was from a school of little tiny garlic, because that's what you were taught growing up. But nowadays, I cook sometimes and I don't even peel it. I just put it whole. Because the more you chop it, the more oil and the more flavor you lose.
All right.
You got it.
I tried not to go over the garlic too much.
I'd rather just smash and give it a rough chop.
Can do this. There.
A proper mince, it feels like there's very little order. People just typically smash garlic and then they just kind of go chop over and over and over the garlic, which you're just kind of breaking down the garlic further and bruising it. I rarely do this method. I don't really chop, or I don't really mince garlic. I tend to use different ways. Oh, still time. Whoops.
Sweet papa.
Oh.
The sweet potato was probably the trickiest for me because it was the most dense.
You don't really care what my yield is on this?
Not at all. There were some papered ends, and I should have trimmed and discarded them. I didn't. I guess I still had the idea of like you don't want to waste. Polly squared the whole thing.
She squared the whole thing?
Yeah.
I feel like that's just cheating.
Ideally, I would be peeling this and then, but for the sake of time.
I mean, who is even chopping potatoes into these small pieces? If home cooks are watching this, I just want to be like, you know, don't do this at home. This is a waste of your time.
Annie's gonna do this so fast, it's gonna be annoying. No.
Looks good.
Wait, what size is this? It's too big.
We're gonna just call these trapezoids and triangles. Oh my god.
Consistency for you.
Oh my god, Brad.
All right.
I'm getting a lecture from Brad. Ugh.
Actually, just like not being a slob is probably like the #1 knife skill. Having a clear sense of workflow. You can definitely always tell when somebody's spent time in a lot of professional kitchens because there's a certain way that they work and a certain cleanness to their style. If you see somebody and it's like, oh, like they're like chopping the carrots on this corner of the board because like the rest of the board is full of like garlic paste and like mashed jicama, that's no good. You can't work like that.
Jicama.
Man, this is a tough guy.
I don't get points off for squaring it off, you said, right? No. Okay, great.
There's probably a better way to do it, but it's like you're usually thinking about yields.
And with the jicama, I just squared it off and then cut planks and then stacked the planks and then just went over them. Pretty classic.
When I was reporting a story a few years ago with So-hee Kim, who has a Korean restaurant in Brooklyn called Insa, she was prepping vegetables for kimchi, and she was doing a julienne like that and just kind of like squared off the edge, fanned it out, and like went to town on it. It's a lot more stable, it's a lot easier, and I feel like you can do it a lot more quickly than you could if you were really going for that kind of like super even matchstick.
When you go to culinary school, you do this for weeks at a time, every day, and you have homework. The joke is like, oh, my dog ate my homework.
You know, it's not really about cutting the little perfect square. It's a matter of like putting hours behind a knife. Having a sharp knife is certainly, in my opinion, a lot less dangerous than a dull knife. Dull knife, you got to fight it and you got to like push a little harder and do kind of stupid things. A nice sharp knife, you're in control, and it's just, you know, it becomes an extension of your hand. Time.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to rush, because if you rush, you will cut your finger. Thank God.
Time.
I think I did pretty well, considering how long has it been. I mean, this is not the same as this, but I don't think it's that bad for an old chef at my own hands.
You know, I'm a little bit disappointed with my julienne. I was rushing, but you know, I'm not gonna beat myself up over it.
I felt like it was more important to properly execute all of them than to be doing it for speed, because I don't really work in an environment where it's necessary to do things for speed.
I think speed is very important, but you want to be proficient, and then you don't want to waste.
You're always balancing one against the other. Obviously, like the pinnacle would be to be incredibly fast and incredibly precise.
I didn't go to culinary school. I don't think you need to know how to really, really speedily chop things into teeny tiny precise shapes.
I don't know the words for like mademoiselle or whatever that is.
So I did a culinary school here in Manhattan. If there's one thing that they definitely did teach you was how to do, you know, little old formal French cuts. And it's really just about discipline and focus and attention to details. They tell you to do something, following instructions and doing it correctly.
You know, I was like the kind of person who in school was like, you know, tried to do a good job, definitely listened. I was there to like learn a lot as quickly as possible. But like these are not things that like you normally do in like everyday life, and like certainly not in the Bon Appetit test kitchen, just because it's sort of just like an outmoded style of working.
Even though we're pretty proficient in our knife skills, we know that not everybody at home might be, so that's why we're not calling for any kind of a lot of julienne or brunoise cuts in our dishes. I don't think we ever do that. I
learned how to use a knife and learned how to prep things from a lot of different people. Before I worked at Bon Appetit, I worked in kitchens it was the only job that I had from 17 until 23 was working back of house. So yeah, like a combination of having like a lot of like line cooks teach me different things and teaching myself.
I went the restaurant route, so I started working in restaurants when I was 16.
The first restaurant that I worked in was called the Beacon Hill Bistros in Boston, and I worked the garde manger station, but my last prep duty before service every day was to brunoise garlic and then really finely chop chives and parsley, and also brunoise shallot.
You do a lot of practice in restaurants where you're cutting the same thing over and over for a particular dish that's on the menu, then stays on the menu.
I had to make about a pint container of each of those, and at first it took me like 3 hours, and I wasn't ready for service many days, and then I eventually got faster and faster.
You know, I feel like in America, especially with TV, everyone's just used to competitions and like who can do it the fastest and the best, and for me, that's the opposite of how I like to cook. If you're in a rush, it's because something happened or you're in the weeds a little. But in an ideal situation, everything should be controlled and calm. And that's a stressful, crazy, fast kitchen is not the kind of environment I like to cook in.
I don't think of myself as a person who sweats the small stuff.
Like, who cares if you can't chop things into small squares? As long as the food tastes good, right?
Yes, no need for this.
I hate food competitions in the worst way. They're the absolute worst. It's not cooking. It's not fun for anyone. Maybe the sick person that's watching.